The sun casts a warm glow over Fairfield High School in Iowa, where students bustle about, eager to start their day. Nohema Graber, a beloved Spanish teacher, greets her students with a smile as they enter her classroom. She's known for her dedication and passion for teaching, and her students often praise her for making learning Spanish both fun and engaging. Outside the school, the local park is a haven for many. Birds chirp, children play, and the elderly take their morning strolls. Among them is Miss Graber, who has made it a daily ritual to walk through the park, enjoying the serenity it offers. Little does she know that two of her students, Willard Miller and Jeremy Goodale, have been observing her routine closely. Back at school, during National Teacher Appreciation Week, a student stands up to acknowledge Miss Graber, expressing gratitude for the fun and learning Miss Graber brings to every lesson.
Happy Teacher Appreciation Week, Mrs. Graber. Thank you for all that you do in and out of the classroom. We really appreciate how much fun we have in your class and how much Spanish we learn. And we just hope you have a really good day. Gracias.
Unbeknownst to everyone in the room, this will be one of the last times they will celebrate her in person. In the school's cafeteria, students chatter about their plans for the weekend, upcoming tests, and the latest school gossip. Among them, Willard and Jeremy sit in a corner, their conversation more hushed than the rest. They exchange glances, nodding in agreement about something only they are privy to. In the days that follow, a somber cloud hangs over Fairfield High School. Miss Graber, once a constant, comforting presence in the hall, is suddenly absent. Whispers circulate about her disappearance, and concern grows among the staff and students, with many wondering where their favorite Spanish teacher could be. The school's atmosphere becomes tense, filled with a mix of worry and speculation, as the community is on the brink of a tragic revelation that will shake them to their core. In the local park, a tarp rustles in the wind, hiding a grim secret beneath it. The tranquility of the park is shattered when Miss Graber's body is discovered, leading to shock and disbelief throughout the community. Miss Graber, it turns out, has been viciously murdered due to a lethal blow to the head. At Fairfield High School, the news hits hard. The school closes its doors for the day, allowing staff and students to process the tragedy and mourn the loss of a cherished educator. The hallways, once filled with laughter and learning, are now eerily silent. As the investigation unfolds, evidence emerges, pointing to Willard and Jeremy. The community struggles to come to terms with the fact that two of their own could be responsible for such a heinous act. The motive remains unclear, but one thing is certain: Fairfield High School will never be the same again. Introducing Private Internet Access, the world's most transparent VPN provider. With over 30 million downloads, they've become the go-to solution for streaming enthusiasts and anyone looking to protect their privacy. Here's some incredible news. By using the link provided, you can enjoy an exclusive 83% discount on private internet access for just $2.03 a month. You can unlock a world of entertainment. And as a bonus, they'll give you 4 extra months completely free. Private internet access is available on all major platforms. Stream your favorite content on your preferred device. Your one subscription is capable of protecting an unlimited amount of devices at the same time. The VPN works seamlessly with all major streaming services, unlocking a world of content no matter where you are. And yes, they support peer-to-peer file sharing. Private internet access prioritizes your privacy. They never record or store user data, and their no logs policy has been proven multiple times in court and verified by a third-party audit from Deloitte. By using private internet access, you can hide your IP address and encrypt your internet connection. Say goodbye to prying eyes. Have commitment issues? Don't. Signing up for private internet access is risk-free. They offer a 30-day money-back guarantee, and their dedicated 24/7 customer service team is always ready to assist you. Link for this amazing offer in the description below. Now let's get back to the video. As the investigation unfolds, the quiet town of Fairfield is shrouded in tension, but a breakthrough emerges in the form of digital evidence. A local teenager approaches the police, revealing a series of Snapchat messages that detail the horrifying events of Nohema's last moments. The messages provide a glimpse into the calculated evil that led to the teacher's death. Willard and Jeremy, once just names in the school register, now become the focal point of a narrative that no one in Fairfield could have anticipated. The Snapchat messages, if authentic, paint a picture of a meticulously planned act and executed with a chilling detachment. Later that evening, an eyewitness recalls a gray van, driven by two males, near the park where Nohema's life was cruelly snuffed out. The van becomes a crucial piece of the puzzle that the police are desperately trying to solve. Willard, now under interrogation by detectives, spins a false tale that is met with skepticism. He speaks of masked teenagers, of being forced to conceal Nohema's body, and of driving the van away from the crime scene. As the evidence mounts, however, the stories told by Willard and Jeremy begin to crumble under the weight of their own inconsistencies. The motive, a crucial aspect of the puzzle, begins to crystallize. The investigation reveals that earlier on the 17th, Willard and his mother had met with Nohema concerning his failing grade. School records and emails paint a picture of a student anguishing over his academic performance, expressing discontent with Nohema's teaching. But it's Willard's phone that proves to be the Pandora's box. A search warrant reveals searches and messages that lay bare the motive in the most bone-chilling manner. One particular search stands out. Quote, "Do students receive credit for a class if the professor is seriously injured or dies more than halfway through the course?" End quote. This, more than anything, highlights the depth of the darkness that had taken root in Willard's mind. An email referred to as the prep email further cements the premeditation theory. Created by Willard, it lists various items and procedures, reading like a cryptic manual for the crime. The email, modified just days before Nohema's death, aligns with the items found at the crime scene, tying Willard to the murder with an almost eerie precision. With the evidence stacked against them, Willard and Jeremy eventually plead guilty to the attack on Nohema. Let's fast forward now to the sentencing proceedings, where Willard stands to receive his penalty for his part in the horrific crime. The overwhelming evidence is discussed by Special Agent Trent Valletta, who investigated the crime. He begins by summarizing the extensive digital evidence, the incriminating Snapchat messages that detailed the crime, the haunting statements Willard made to his peers implying his violent actions, and prep email found on Willard's phone, all painting a picture of premeditation and malice.
Haley, they provided to us screenshots from Snapchats that he had received from Jeremy Goodale that were very graphic in nature, detailing the murder of Nohema Graver.
And did those Snapchats also implicate the defendant, Willard Miller?
Yes, they did.
Can you summarize that information for the court?
There's a couple important things to note. The Snapchats are often deleted as soon as you open them and close them, they become deleted. So there were several initial Snapchats that John Burnett was not able to save. The ones he did save talked about how Jeremy Goodale describes him and another person attacking Mrs. Graver in the park and hitting her with a baseball bat. He also says it was because she gave the wrong student a failing grade in Spanish. John Burnett would testify that some of the other information he had received, including the earlier Snapchats, would implicate Willard Miller in that assault and murder.
And just to be clear, the Snapchats that were provided by John Burnett to law enforcement were between John Burnett and Jeremy Goodale, is that right?
That's right.
And in those Snapchats, he not only implicated himself, but also the defendant in this case, is that correct?
That's correct.
And is that how the investigation then shifted to focusing on Jeremy Goodale and Willard Miller?
So what was interesting was when we had first got there were the Fairfield Police Department had listed Willard Miller as a suspect based on some statements he had made to someone else. Jeremy Goodale was not on the board, but obviously once we had the Snapchats, Goodale and Miller kind of rose to the top of the suspect list.
Agent Valletta, there were other young people, high school kids that you interviewed, or you or other officers interviewed as part of this investigation.
Yes.
Was one of those young man by the name of Dill Herlin?
Yes.
What did Dill Herlin provide to law enforcement that was of assistance in determining who was responsible for the death of Nohema Graber?
So, Dill Herlin was he was at the top of the board, the whiteboard, as far as people we needed to talk to in the police department. He had told another teen who was, I guess, a relative of one of the jailers, so it kind of came secondhand, that Willard Miller had told him that if Nohema Graber comes up missing in the next couple weeks, not to contact the police. I had signed Special Agent Chris Spencer then to interview Dill Herlin at the police department, where he provided additionally where that statement was in fact true, and Dill Herlin also described the conversation he had with Willard Miller, in which Willard Miller stated that Nohema Graber's routes were very predictable and that he could easily hit her with a bat at the park.
Did you and others interview other friends or acquaintances of the defendant?
Yes, we did.
Was one of those Talon Sisimophone?
Yes.
I think I just mispronounced his name, but nonetheless, you talked to Talon. Is
Yes,
that right?
we did.
Can you describe for the court what information Talon provided you with regard to the death of Nohema Graber?
So on November 3rd in English class, he had a conversation with Willard Miller, in which Willard Miller told him he had caught someone with a baseball bat. I'm relatively old at this point. I wasn't aware of that term, but Talon interpreted that term, and I guess all the teenagers interpreted that term as catching someone with a baseball bat means killing them with a baseball bat.
Or at least striking them, correct?
Yes.
Agent Willard, I want to shift a bit here. In any case, do you attempt to develop the motive for any particular action or death of a victim?
So that's a great question. In a homicide or a murder, motive isn't one of the elements. However, it seems if we can prove motive, it's one of the things the jury wants to hear. So we were actually able to show not only the motive, but also the opportunity that Willard Miller would have had to kill Mrs. Graber.
Let's talk a bit about the motive. What information did you develop in this case that would have provided the reason for why Willard Miller would have wanted to kill Nohema Graber?
So it starts with the Snapchats from Jeremy Goodale, in which he says that Nohema Graber had failed the wrong student. We had known, due to the investigation from the Fairfield Police Department, that earlier on the 2nd, Willard Miller and his mom had met with Nohema Graber regarding his failing grade. We had retrieved some school records, emails that would show how Willard Miller was anguishing over how bad his grade was and how he didn't feel that Nohema Graber was a good teacher. And then eventually we do a search warrant on, or a celebrate, I guess, on Willard Miller's phone, which greatly details the motive.
Before we talk about that search of the Celebrite search, were you able to confirm with the Fairfield Public Schools that Willard Miller had a failing grade in Spanish?
Yes, he was getting an F at the time of Nohema Graber's death.
And you were able to confirm that he was actually a student with Nohema Graver, is that right?
That is correct.
Was Jeremy Goodale a current student of Nohema Graver's in November of 2021?
I don't think he was, and I think he actually did pretty well in that class.
Okay. He had had her prior as a Spanish teacher, is that right?
I believe that's correct, yes.
Okay, so this is Exhibit 130 that's on the screen. Do you see that?
Yes.
How is it that this document would have been created, if you know?
It's searches that are done on your phone. They're often just, they stay there forever. So when a celebrite is done or a search warrant is done to recover those records, often the searches are, it's just something that people don't think to erase.
Okay, so there are a number of entries on this document that relate to a Google search created by the defendant, is that right?
That's correct.
To be clear, this information came directly from his phone that you seized, is that right?
Yeah, yes, that's correct.
On the far right side of this document, there are numerous entries that say Chaden's iPhone, is that right?
Yes,
Okay, so this is Chaden's iPhone.
yes.
All right. If we could move to scoot it down a bit to 342. All right. So this is an entry that would have been a Google search. Can you describe at the left-hand box that we see in this exhibit what it is we're looking at here?
So this is essentially would be the motive for Nohema Graver's death, where Willard Miller is asking do students receive credit for class if the professor is seriously injured or dies more than halfway through the course.
What are we looking at here in Exhibit 131?
So this would be an email. It shows that it kind of when it was created, when it was modified. So it had been modified on October 30th of 21. We call it the prep email. This is something that was created by Willard Miller, listing different items and that sort of thing that would be used eventually on the attack on Nohema Graver.
This was actually on the left-hand side. This would have been created in September of 20. Is that right?
Yes, that's what it shows.
Right. And then modified on October 30th of 21, correct?
Yes,
Which would have been several days before Nohema Graver was murdered. Is that right?
yes,
And then there's a procedure that is also in this message. Is that right?
yes,
And it says stun, move off trail, empty compartments, load cargo, blanket cargo, deactivate compartment contents, leave bag by exit, transport, empty transport, safety stun, switch glove, deactivate article to bag, finalize the win, in parentheses it says secure victory, load into storage spot, don't forget to close the door to the ground, switch glove, move the sticks, wipe down tools, dispose article, and grab bag by exit, and then done. Did I read that correctly?
yes.
It's a rather cryptic message, wouldn't you say?
I would say it's very cryptic, and you don't really have to read between the lines to know what he's describing.
This would be at least partially consistent with the items that were found at the scene, as well as the circumstances that you learned concerning Nohema Graver's death. Is that right?
That's correct.
During the investigation, the police would interview Willard about the attack. This interrogation would be discussed during the sentencing proceedings, in the form of the testimony of Special Agent Ryan Kedley. He begins by recounting the early stages of the investigation, emphasizing the critical information provided by the classmates about Willard's involvement. The initial conversation was cordial, with the detective trying to understand Willard's background, his relationship with Nohema, and his general demeanor. However, as the interview progressed, inconsistencies began to surface in Willard's narrative, particularly regarding his whereabouts and actions on the day of Nohema's death. Diving deeper, the detective speaks of a significant turn in Willard's story, his claim of witnessing a group of 6 to 8 masked individuals chasing Nohema in the park. Willard described hearing a thud, then seeing the group carrying what he assumed was Nohema into the woods. However, he couldn't provide the names of these alleged individuals, adding a layer of doubt to his account. Initially, Willard denied any knowledge of Nohema's death, but later he admitted to witnessing the incident in the park.
And so initially, as we were going through the briefing, we were advised specifically of the information that John Burnett had begun providing information indicating that he was aware of the person or persons responsible for the death of Nohema Graber. And so Case Agent Goodale had requested that I meet directly with Mr. Burnett and Katie McGuire, I believe it was his girlfriend, there at the Fairfield Police Department to further discuss the information which they both held.
And the information that they both held, where did that lead you in your investigation?
That information, detailed in the course of several screenshots of Snapchat communications, led us to identifying Jeremy Goodale and Shady Miller as being certainly persons of interest and suspects in the death of Nohema Graber.
Based on this information and your interview with those two individuals, what investigative steps were taken?
And so, after the initial interview of Mr. Burnett and Ms. McGuire, search warrants were offered for the search of the persons of both Mr. Goodale and Mr. Miller, as well as their respective residences.
Could you just kind of give us a rough thumbnail sketch of your conversation with Mr. Miller, how it started, and some really kind of relevant points of that conversation with Mr. Miller starting at the beginning?
Yes, so again, setting the stage, Mr. Miller was woken up from his home and brought to the local police department for the sake of being interviewed as part of an ongoing homicide investigation. And so he was also subjected to a search warrant. And so upon meeting in person with Mr. Miller and identifying, introducing myself and Special Agent Vale, who assisted on this interview, we had initially advised him of his juvenile waiver Miranda rights. He had elected to sign that form and then permitted us to continue questioning him. For the better part of the first section, several minutes, if not 20 to 30 minutes of the interview, it was basically laying the groundwork of understanding the fundamental basis of who Chaden was, what his role within the school was, how he knew Miss Graber, how his life in general was going. I would say that conversation was very cordial between myself, Agent Vale, and Mr. Miller.
Would you be able to classify or kind of describe Mr. Miller's demeanor during the course of this initial conversation?
Certainly compared to several other interviews which have turned out to be those of suspects, I would describe Miller's demeanor as being remarkably relaxed, especially given the circumstances of his age, the nature of the interview, the time of the interview, the fact that he was so comfortable and open, seemingly open with investigators in that opening stage of the interview, I felt was very remarkable.
And you just qualified your statement seemingly open. Did that initial conversation that you had with Mr. Miller, let's call it conversation one, did the facts that were unearthed or attested to by Mr. Miller change as the conversation progressed?
Yes, they did.
At what point did you kind of note that maybe there was more to this story and maybe Mr. Miller was holding back or changing some of the relevant facts in this case?
Well, early on in the interview with Mr. Miller, while trying to get to know Mr. Miller as best I could, one of the questions that I had asked him was who were some of his close friends. And I felt that it was notable in his response where he listed several friends, but one of them was not Mr. Goodale himself. Not that I know him well enough to say that was definitively untrue, but I did think that it was notable to circle back around later on in the interview to confirm that.
At this point of the interview, you had two suspects, principal suspects in mind, correct?
That's correct.
And did you have kind of some foreknowledge that they were close?
Yes.
Mr. Goodale and Mr. Miller?
Yes.
So it would stand out that Mr. Miller would indicate Mr. Goodale was a close associate?
Yes, it would.
And during the course of his essentially running through his day on the day of Mrs. Graver's death, did he indicate to you initially that he had spent any time with Mr. Goodale?
No, he did not.
Did that later come out that it was actually a substantial portion of his day was with Mr. Goodale?
Yes, it did.
What are some other factors that might have kind of tickled your concern about Mr. Miller's story?
Well, in detailing his life events throughout the course of that day on the afternoon and evening of November 2nd, he was pretty confident in the way he exhibited that information of he had gone from having a meeting with his mother and Miss Graver at the school to going to the office of his mother where he continued to do homework while his mother worked, and going from there directly to his home where he spent the remainder of the evening. As we reiterated that account, he began to change that account. One of the initial items that he changed was the fact that who he had run into. Upon first saying that he had not come across Jeremy Goodale throughout the course of that afternoon and evening, later on he admitted that sure enough he had. And to clarify, this was an interview that was taking place approximately a day and a half after the information we were discussing. So I would have presumed, in spite of the fact that it was early morning, that he would have had a pretty good recollection of what exactly happened and who he came across. And so after initially denying running into Mr. Goodale on his way from his mother's office to his home, then he came around and said, actually, yes, I did run into him, which I found a bit concerning that one small point would be omitted, again, given the circumstances and the timing of the interview.
Did you speak with Mr. Miller about the last time he saw Mrs. Graver?
I did, yes.
And did that story change?
Yes, it did.
Did you speak to him about his physical whereabouts the day of Mrs. Graver's death?
Yes.
And did that still change?
Yes.
How many versions of the story would you say that Caden spun for you during the course of your interview?
Well, there were certainly multiple versions, but within some of the later versions that he provided, he would add details as I would break down those versions. For example, in addition to what he was doing specifically, how those actions were taken.
Mr. Miller originally denied having any knowledge about the death of Mrs. Graver, correct?
That's correct.
And later on, he talked about actually witnessing a part or a portion of her demise, correct?
Yes, he described an incident where a group of masked individuals, numbered somewhere between 6 and 8, had pursued Miss Graver in Chautauqua Park. Miller described hearing what he described as a thud, and then looking down into Chautauqua Park and seeing this group of masked individuals carry some sort of object into the woods, which he had assumed was Miss Graver herself.
Now, did Mr. Miller, was he able to provide for you the names of any of these 6 to 8 masked individuals who allegedly drug Mrs. Graver into the woods?
Not specifically the names of those individuals. No, he was not.
Were any names kind of generated by Mr. Miller during the course of this interview?
Yes.
And without listing all the names per se, in your later conversation with Mr. Goodale, were any of the names consistent?
So during that initial interview with Mr. Miller, one of the questions I believe I asked him was, were there people out there that he felt or knew about that may have wanted to do harm to Miss Graver? he had actually identified that, yes, there were several people that had gone through Miss Graver's class and had ill feelings towards Miss Graver, and then also at least provided, I believe, at least 3 specific names of classmates of his who he thought were capable and had ill feelings towards Miss Graver.
In your later conversation with co-defendant Goodale, did Mr. Goodale tell you any individuals that Mr. Miller maybe had a beef with or had troubles with?
I believe that he said that he didn't have any issues of bullying, but he did have some disagreements with some of his classmates/associates at Fairfield High School.
And were any of the names that Mr. Goodale listed as people Mr. Miller had problems with at high school the same names as he listed as being involved in the death of Mrs. Graver?
I believe that they were, yes.
The incident took an emotional toll on both the victim and perpetrator's families. It eroded the sense of safety that the residents had long taken for granted, shattering the community's belief in their own security. According to a police officer who testified during Willard's sentencing proceeding, the grim discovery of Nohema's body only escalated the community's distress. Students were terrified to attend classes, and teachers were apprehensive about returning to their jobs, questioning their own safety. The school administration, recognizing the profound impact on the school's atmosphere, shut down the schools. They brought in counselors and initiated an early release for 2.5 days, followed by a complete closure for the same duration. The crime's ripples extended beyond the school, affecting community stakeholders and prompting a coordinated response to support mental health and well-being.
In the immediate aftermath of her death, what actions were taken by Fairfield Police and the Fairfield community at large in the days after her death that impacted the community?
I think we started with before we actually located Nohema Graver's body. Everybody, when we went public with the missing person reports, the media got involved. Everybody in Southeast Iowa knew that Nohema Graver was missing. Everybody was spun up. Everybody was concerned. Everybody was looking for her. Once we found her body and we did the media release that Mrs. Graver's body had been recovered, we had students that were scared to death to attend class. We had teachers that didn't want to teach for the concerns of their own safety. It was such a concern to the point where the schools shut down the schools. They obtained counselors, I think for 2.5 days, that they got out early, and then for like 2.5 days, there was no school. And then when the kids came back to school and teachers came back to school, there were counselors for both the teachers and the staff for the school. In addition to that, we had, as a community as a whole, we have stakeholders. We're a small community. We have key personnel, whether it's for the hospital, other healthcare providers, whether it's the hospital, mental health awareness, any place that anybody goes, such as the well, to get services or ask for help. We made sure that everybody had a complete list of mental health providers, of various services that we thought that anybody else would need in the community to take care of the well-being of our community. I think that obviously it destroyed Chaden's family, this incident. It's destroyed Jeremy's family. It's destroyed Nohema's family. It has destroyed, our community is considered safe. We're kinder, we're gentler. That's the gist of our community. That's what we take pride in. And I think this incident shattered that belief for a lot of people. It took their safety, their well-being of the general public, and just stripped it of everybody, from everybody as a result of this. You know, we're still continuing to have school safety meetings to upgrade the safety protocols in the schools. Some of that came because of the school shootings nationally, and we got funding for it. But the other parts of this, making sure all the schools were aware of critical incident responses, how the police were going to go, where everybody was going to go, just so that everybody was on the same sheet of music. We continue to do those things. We still have meetings today with the safety, well-being. Every time that we've had a court proceeding, we make sure that there are safe falls in place for our community so that we can take care of the community as a whole and their well-being.
Nohema's family and loved ones would issue victim statements during the sentencing hearing, providing their own versions of the damage caused by Willard and Jeremy.
Who was the brother-in-law of Nohema Graver.
This case has had an enormous impact on Nohema's family, Fairfield High School, and the Fairfield community at large. Not only was Nohema robbed of 30-some of the best years of her life, her murder deprived Paul Graver of the love of his life and certainly hastened Paul's own premature death. It has also had major impacts in the lives of their children, Christian, Jared, and Nohema Marie.
In the end, Willard was sentenced to life with a mandatory 35-year minimum in the murder of Nohema Graver.
Wholeheartedly accept responsibility for the role that I've played in the murder of Nohema Graver. I would like to apologize for my actions, first and foremost to the family. I'm sincerely sorry for the distress that I've caused you and the devastation I've caused your family, and from the bottom of my heart, I am sorry for your loss. I'm sorry to hear about Paul Graver. I would also like to apologize to the community, to just the ripple effect that my actions have had, everyone that has affected. I would like to apologize to Nohema Graver's church. I know now that she was a very active member there and doing a lot of good things there. I'd like to apologize for what I did and how that affected them. I would like to apologize to my family. I love you guys so much, and I'm really sorry for what I've done and how it's affected you. And I'm planning on getting back out there as soon as I can and make up for lost time. I'd also like to apologize to the Goodale family. I'm sorry for the position that Jeremy's in, and I wish you the best, and I hope that he gets out as soon as possible. Sorry. I know what I did was wrong, and I accept responsibility for my carelessness, for my ignorance, and also I'd like to apologize to the police department and the investigators there for the misinformation I provided back in 2021 to lead them on a wild goose chase I ended up there. I'm sorry for that. Coming here today, now at the end of this stretched out journey, I'm realizing just the magnitude of my actions, and I know it's wrong, and I knew it was wrong, and yet I still carried through. I still did what I did, and I accept responsibility for that. And I apologize to all parties, everyone affected, to my community, to my family, to the Gravers, of course. And I ask that I'm given a chance, and I don't want to be institutionalized. I don't want to be in so long that I forget about what matters, where I come from, and what I need to do. I look forward to getting through this. Thank you.
The definition of malice is the intention or the desire to do evil. And evil does not have a birthday. This court cannot overrule precedent. However, I will not gloss over the fact that you and Mr. Goodale cut Nohema Graver's precious life short. That would not be justice, regardless of your age, Mr. Miller. The bedrock of our criminal justice system is deterrence and rehabilitation. And ultimately, while acknowledging your youth and developing brain, I find that your intent and actions were sinister and evil. Those acts resulted in the intentional loss of human life in a brutal fashion. There's no excuse. There is not a systemic societal problem that explains or justifies your actions. The court finds, based on the nature and circumstances of this offense, along with the required 25 factors that I am to consider in sentencing a juvenile in the state of Iowa for murder in the first degree, that the defendant, Willard Noble Chaden Miller, should be sentenced to life with the possibility of parole after 35 years. This sentence is permissible under the Iowa law. A 35-year mandatory minimum is not cruel and unusual punishment for the defendant, as it represents the appropriate time of incarceration for the defendant in Mr. Goodale's premeditated murder.
So, what may have led Willard to lash out in such a destructive manner just for bad grades? One theory to explain his actions is the strain theory, which suggests that societal pressures can lead individuals to commit crimes. According to this theory, Willard's academic struggles and the pressure to succeed might have created psychological strain. If he felt that his goals were impossible to achieve through legitimate means, he might have resorted to extreme measures to eliminate the perceived source of his strain, which in this case was his teacher Nohema. Strain theory also emphasizes the role of negative emotions in driving criminal behavior. If Willard experienced intense feelings of stress, frustration, or anger due to his academic challenges, and if he lacked the emotional support or resources to cope with these feelings, they might have manifested in destructive ways. This emotional turmoil might have been further exacerbated if he perceived Nohema's actions as unfair, or felt that she was directly impeding his future opportunities. Moreover, the strain theory suggests that individuals who feel disconnected from societal norms or who lack solid social bonds are more likely to engage in deviant behavior. If Willard felt alienated from his peers or family, or if he lacked a supportive social network, he might have felt he had little to lose by acting out in violence. This sense of detachment might have made it easier for him to dehumanize his victim and rationalize his actions. This analysis, of course, is not intended to validate Willard's actions, but is only a tool to better understand his twisted motives. Why do you think Jeremy went along with Willard's plan? Do you think Willard had other reasons to attack his teacher other than bad grades? We want to give a big thanks to everyone over on Patreon. We want to give a big shout out to Nexus, Big Pepperoni Pizza, Chrissy R, and Dulce P. If you want to watch ad-free and uncensored versions of all Wicked videos, feel free to join our Patreon, link in the description. Thank you for watching, and join us next time when we explore the psychological maze of some of the most wicked people.